Welcome to the Sexual Harassment and Grooming Awareness Training for the Boise School District. During this presentation, we will cover items that employees and volunteers need to know. Let us begin with examples of sexual harassment. Sometimes harassment is overt and obvious to everyone in the room, whereas other times it might be more subtle or behaviors that come across in a subtle way. So, for example, sexual jokes, comments, gestures, staring at body parts, offensive words on clothing. These are all things that could be construed as sexual harassment. Using sexually degrading words to describe someone also might be sexual harassment. Intimate questions, obviously touching, putting arms around the waist and hips and so forth, scratching on the back, things of that nature, also could be interpreted as sexual harassment. Other examples of sexual harassment might include things like unwanted calls or text messages, unwelcome flirting, transmitting or posting emails, texts, pictures of a sexual nature, displaying sexually suggestive objects, pictures, posters, playing sexually suggestive music, or talking about one's sexual activities in front of others. So how do you avoid sexual harassment? Well, CYA, check your assumptions, is what that means to us. Don't assume your behavior is acceptable to everyone. Always remain professional. Be aware of how others are responding to you. Read the room. Respect each person's differences and need for personal space. And when in doubt, don't say it, don't do it. From there, we'd like to talk a bit about grooming and boundary invasion. This slide provides a definition of each. Grooming is a process where a predator or groomer gradually wins the trust of the victim through a series of escalating behaviors and or associations, whereas boundary invasion is initiating or extending personal contact with students beyond the school day for personal purposes that have no educational value. We'll dig into each a little further in the subsequent slides. So examples of grooming behaviors might be things like having secrets with students, and that doesn't mean something, for example, if a third grade student tells an adult, hey, I want to tell you a secret. I'm going to surprise my mom with a bouquet of flowers for her birthday. That's obviously not what we're talking about. But other than harmless things like that, generally speaking, having secrets with students is not a good idea. Becoming a confidant of the child when it's really not your position to do so. Remember that your job is to establish healthy professional adult-student relationships. That's different than being a friend. Giving a student special privileges can also be a grooming behavior. Talking to a child about your own personal problems that normally would be things shared with an adult could be grooming behaviors. Inviting students into your home or to meet off campus can be grooming behaviors. So how do you establish boundaries with students? Well, as a teacher, avoid scheduling student aides during your prep time. If you're going to have a student aide, make sure it's during one of your regular classes so they just are in the classroom with you with other students present. Avoid using current or former minor students as personal babysitters, dog walkers, etc. Avoid sexually themed or inappropriate jokes. Avoid communicating through personal text or social media. Do not make comments about a student's body. There's no reason to do things like that. Do not have discussion with students about romantic or sexual activities. Avoid inviting students to your home. Never touch students in a way that a reasonable person could interpret as inappropriate. And if students have personal or health issues, refer them to the principal, counselor, or nurse to deal with those types of things, as that's more within their role than it is yours. Avoid being one-on-one with students when at all possible. Keep it public. Work with students in small groups or while others are in the room or in the vicinity. Keep the window, blinds, or door open with the lights on. Be mindful of everyone's personal space. Try not to always linger around the same student, even if you are using proximity for classroom management. Bear in mind how often and for the duration and frequency that you're spending in one person's space. If an event occurs or you witness anything inappropriate between another staff member and a student, report it immediately. When it comes to transporting students, we strongly discourage transporting students in your personal vehicle. If you find yourself placed in a position where there is no other choice, here are some tips to remember. Get approval from your building administrator and get the approval of the parent. When you leave to take the student home, call your administrator and keep an open line throughout the drive so that your administrator can hear what's going on and you have another witness there. Take a colleague with you if available. Follow school procedures. Sit the student in the back seat and know that your personal auto insurance is the primary insurance coverage. A few other things to consider. We recognize that at times an employee might find themselves alone with a student, either inadvertently or by circumstance related to their specific role. For example, an administrator, a counselor, psychologist, and so forth. I think of an assistant principal, for example, maybe having a one-on-one discussion with a student. You might find yourself either inadvertently or due to the scope of your job, alone with a student. If that occurs, here are some best practices and thoughts to consider. Keep the door open if possible. Not all of those discussions are so private and confidential that a door must be closed. Bring a colleague into the discussion if appropriate and if they're available. Maybe an assistant principal next door or a counselor is available to come and sit in on the discussion if the door needs to be closed. Keep the blinds open if there's a window and lights on. If your office doesn't have windows, then consider moving to a space that does, maybe a conference room, for example, and reconvene the discussion in the conference room with the blinds open. Log the time the meeting begins, log the time the meeting ends. If possible, avoid making it a routine with a specific student or students who routinely have to be in your office for some reason with the door closed. When it comes to school business and technology, attempt to use school devices to conduct business as much as you can. And understand that district-owned devices, as well as personal devices that are used for business-related responsibilities, are subject to the Freedom of Information Act and can be requested. Keep conversations related to school business. Include students' parents or legal guardian when communicating with a student. Avoid communicating solely with any individual student via email and things like that. Always assume that electronic communications can be accessed by others now and in the future. Personal technology. Limit your personal use of your cell phone, including apps, texting, etc., while on the job. Do not accept a friend request from students, nor should you send a friend request to students using any social media platform. Be conscious of what you write on Facebook, Twitter, emails, etc. And when you post things, be sure the things you're proud of, things you would gladly show your mother, your students, your superintendent, the New York Times, all of Twitter, because we know that those posts follow you. Over the last several years, there have been instances of grooming and boundary invasion you may have seen in the news. One such instance was an Idaho teacher accepted a friend request from a student on Snapchat. The student videoed himself engaged in sexual actions with another student. The teacher viewed the video but did not report it to administration and received a reprimand from the Professional Standards Commission. Another instance, Idaho teacher accepted a friend request from a former student on Facebook. The student was 17 at the time, and over time, the relationship grew into a romantic one. In that instance, the teacher's certification was revoked by the Professional Standards Commission. In yet another instance, Idaho teacher and student exchanged cell phone numbers. Over time, text messages and phone calls turned into FaceTime calls, which evolved into a romantic relationship. Again, that teacher lost their certification via the Professional Standards Commission. So, how do you respond if you experience or witness some type of grooming behaviors? If you see something, say something. Any questionable behavior that might involve grooming behaviors or harassment by a colleague or any other person must be reported to your principal or supervisor immediately. Reports will be taken seriously and responded to accordingly. If you do not feel as though your report is being considered with appropriate urgency and care, please report directly to your quadrants area director, and it will be handled from there. Also, remember that we have further information available through our Vector courses. And if you have not started those yet, please do so as soon as possible. And remember that the deadline is December 21st, 2023 to complete those trainings. Thank you for taking time to participate in this training today. Should you have any questions, please reach out to your building principal.